So good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Nightwatch on the Ops Desk. I am Paul Morrow, and a lot going on in the security world as ever. Tonight, we have Minneapolis, of course, on the domestic front. Things popping off there. Tom Homan has landed on the ground. Are things going to change? Then, we're going to look at the international situation. The aircraft carrier, the USS Lincoln, that's an aircraft carrier group, what Trump is calling an armada, has hit the Persian Gulf off the shores of Iran. What does that mean, and what could happen this week? And then finally, Signalgate, the investigation into the group on Signal that seems to be coordinating everything going on in Minneapolis. Is this penetrable? How are the feds going to get to it? Paul Morrow on Nightwatch coming up. So we go to Minneapolis, and as we all know, if you're paying attention to this stuff, Tom Homan has hit the ground there. Are things going to change? What happens next? Well, look, there's going to be a couple of metrics, and let's not lose sight of it. First of all, Trump has put out right off the top, as everybody is focusing on the bright, shiny of fire Nome, Bavino left town, and etc. Here comes Homan. First of all, is the point I made on the Gutfeld show last night. If Tom Homan is your kinder, gentler, you're in deep trouble as far as Minneapolis goes, all right? Because the metrics that Donald Trump set out are quite clear, and there are three. And they need to be taken in turn because they are going to determine whether or not this whole thing is successful in terms of a reset. Number one, Donald Trump said in no uncertain terms, I expect you, Tim Walz, to give up your prisoners, as many of us have been saying from the get-go. I've been saying it from the top as soon as this thing started. Simplest thing to ask for the prisoners. That is to say, people who are deportable, who are foreign nationals, who are in the Minnesota prison system, okay? Not people that have been released, that are still in the county and city jails. Walz has them, he has to give them up. I've suggested in the past that if he won't give them up, go into federal court and get warrants or get a writ of habeas corpus. It's just an order from a judge, give me the body, all right? The federal judges being what they are in Minnesota, I don't even know if that would work. You'd have to go all the way up the chain. Now, I want to stick to number one here. The reason this is significant is the following. They won't want to do this. I don't care what anybody says, all right? Walz is not going to be eager to do this. You're going to have to pull them out of jail. You're going to have to hand them over. You're going to hear all these stories about, oh, this guy wasn't such a bad guy. He was flaked by the courts, meaning that he was railroaded. And we shouldn't be handing him over. And they're going to fight it like crazy, including the immigration lawyers. They're all going to come piling in and saying, no, you're going to be sending this guy back to El Salvador. It's a death sentence because, there's an implication here that he's a member of MS-13 and a rival faction wants to kill him. All right, that's what happened with Abrego Garcia. Why are our immigration judges getting involved in potential gang disputes in El Salvador or any country? We don't have the ability to investigate that. And yet that's the metric they use. You want to deport this guy? He's completely deportable. He's a felon. Oh, but you can't send him there because he has a beef with another gangbanger. Not our problem. I'm sorry, but it's not. Why? Because even if you have some sort of moral compunction about that, we don't have the ability to investigate all of these cases. You can't investigate. What are you going to do? You're going to send DOJ troops to agents to El Salvador to try to get in the weeds on who's mad at who in a gang situation? We can't figure that out here. We're going to figure it out in El Salvador. It's preposterous. And that is the system working the way the Dems wanted it. They brought in 10 to 20 million unvetted. If you accept that number, it could be more. During the last administration, I'm going back years. And the point was it was supposed to lead to a permanent blue majority. Two ways. Number one, the census. Illegals are counted in the census. Let's remember something. In the last census, Minnesota almost lost a seat. That is to say, a congressional seat. And they would have lost then a seat with the for the election, okay, in the Electoral College. So if you lose that, obviously your power is diminished. They may lose more this time around, and so you need as many bodies as you can. Somalis and others, okay? So they're going to fight that tooth and nail because they get counted in the census. But they also know the following. If you bring in 10 to 20 million unvetted migrants, and the lawyers, that is the immigration lawyers who are always funded by these NGOs, they're all hyper-left, They fight each case. You can clog the courts. There's no way to adjudicate 10 to 20 million deportations. All right. You can barely get, in fact, you probably can't adjudicate case by case the deportations you need of the worst of the worst. And they know this because they devised this system. So, that being the case, Trump sends Holman and he makes request number one, demand number one, I should say. Give me the prisoners that are in jail. Reportedly, it's north of 1,300. I don't know about all of you out there, but I do not see Tim Walz pulling 1,300 between him and Fry, because there's also some in the city jails. Do you see those two characters who are hinging their political future, their political fortunes on all of this? Walz's is obviously, his political future is on a real slide. And Fry, who knows what his ambitions are? He's never met a situation he couldn't pander to if he thinks it's going to keep him in a government paycheck. So if that's the case, are they going to give up 1,300? They're going to live with the optic of getting corrections to go into population, pulling these guys out, and then handing them over to Tom Homan? I see that being a potential worst optic for them, and here's why. Unlike these street encounters that Bavino was running, whether you like them or not, as they were hitting around town and doing these extractions, it was very hard to get media there. It was very hard to get the film. That's why, obviously, Walz was saying, get out there and film them. We need a record of all of this. But a prescribed procedure of corrections, handing bodies over to Tom Homan and ICE, that is going to be the kind of thing you can get eyes on, as they say. You can get a camera on that. You can witness it. And if that's the case, you're going to get all this footage of these poor neighbors there. These are our friends, our neighbors, our loved ones. All the love that Fry talks about. That love is going to be completely undercut as Fry and Walz accede to Donald Trump's demands here. Number one, which is, give me those bodies. And you can extrapolate out from that. The other two requests that Donald Trump put in place here are really, I think, demands. I don't think it's really part of it. I think it's non-negotiable. Number two, help us get the over 400, reportedly about 470, that you've already released that are on the streets of Minneapolis or other cities in Minnesota that you let out of jail that were deportable and you just released out onto the streets. That's going to look a lot like what was going on under Bavino, so I don't see the difference. And then the third metric that is part of the Trump conditions, which I really don't see them acceding to, and that is the following. Any person who's deportable who gets arrested by police in Minnesota or Minneapolis, obviously, hand them over. They got to get handed over as well upon arrest. Get arrested for something, give them to Homan's people, and out they go. My point is, none of this is all that different than what was already going on. And if you think that the people that are looking to burn down hotels because they think ICE and Bavino might be in there, people that are trying to set up more no-go zones, chops, and all this other stuff, because they think none of this applies to Minnesota. They somehow have gotten it into their heads that it's a sovereign state that can do whatever it wants, not part of America, and apparently the ICE laws don't apply there. Because that's what this is really about. It's not about the tactics. That's the bright shiny. They call it in law a collateral issue. Everybody is focusing on the procedure, what's going on. But the real thing that's going on underneath, as I said last night in the other night, actually, in my 3-minute recap, the demand from the other side, from Minnesota, is just ICE out, period, unequivocal. In other words, federal law doesn't apply here. That's a non-starter. So I hate to be pessimistic. I know right now everybody's saying, all right, everybody's dialing it down. That's good. Let's see where it goes. And I hope I'm wrong, by the way, because I do want to see it dialed down. Because I don't want to see American citizens killed. You've had 2 killed, even though I couldn't disagree with them more politically. That's not who we are, and that's not what we want. But that said, anybody who has the Pollyannic view right now that this is all going to go swimmingly and we're all going to be singing the national anthem as Walz and Fry hand bodies over to the hated Tom Homan, I think, frankly, they are seeing what they want to see, and they're being gaslighted. And that's what I think is going to be the future here in Minneapolis and Minnesota, and we are only at the beginning. Let's move on. I want to go to the international front in the time that we have. Look, We're going to talk later in the week about Venezuela. We got to start to pay attention to that. We got Maduro out of there, but we left his number two in charge. And Trump is telling us, well, she's okay. I like Delcy. She's nice. She's great. She's working with us. I like her. I don't get that. All right, but we're going to deal with that later in the week. I want to go to Iran because, as I said at the top, the USS Lincoln is on the way to the Persian Gulf. Actually, it should be there now in the Persian Gulf, right off the shores of Iran, which is the kind of thing that'll focus the attention of any regime, even if you're a bunch of mullahs who think that you're in the 7th century. Now, here's the thing. There's more power in this armada than like in the entire Middle East. All right. The people don't realize the difference in magnitude between what America can deploy and other nations can. That said, we always said in the intelligence world, the enemy gets a vote. What do we do now? As I've said in the past, I think that there's no way you intercede here unless you're guaranteed regime change. Otherwise, I don't get the point. If you leave the mullahs in place, then don't do anything. I don't know what the end game is here, and I think we're getting into a very, very dicey area because America has had enough of interventionism in Middle East. We got issues here at home. The America First policy regimen does not admit for a whole bunch of foreign adventurism trying to build regime change, democratic institutions overseas in places that just they've never taken hold. But that said, if you're going to do it, go big or go home. And having a whole aircraft carrier group there argues we're starting to go big. This is a very big deal, okay? This will be the biggest intervention in my lifetime because Iran is the source of so much trouble over there that I think this will make Iraq take second place. This could be a very, very big deal. It depends on how close we really are to a tipping point in Iran. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. We got a great guest. We're going to cut him in now. We did a full podcast with him on the Ops Desk. That'll be dropping this week. I urge you to go to opsdesk.org, sign up. This will be behind the paywall, fully warned, okay? Because I got to pay for all of this. But that said, the podcast with Captain Morgan, all right? Captain Morgan Murphy, he's running for Senate in Alabama. He is Naval Reserves. He served as a captain. He served in the Trump White House the first time around. He was a Pentagon spokesperson. This guy has forgotten more about this kind of thing than I'm ever going to know. He's a terrific guest. Let's bring him in now.
Trump is dismantling. I think the important thing for people to understand here is he is playing 4D chess with the Chinese and choking off their energy. Right. Where do they get energy? Russia, Iran, Venezuela.
Right.
So, right. I mean, and look at what this president is doing to reorder that chessboard. Like we'll still sell you energy, but if you move in on Taiwan, if you try to destabilize Asia, watch out.
He's putting all of that in place, and that gives us levers if and when the time comes, God forbid, because we all know that Taiwan is the real flashpoint there. Let me ask you this. What does the target scenario look like for the Lincoln and its attendant assets? They're coming, obviously it's an aircraft carrier. You're coming in with all kinds of planes. What are those planes going to hit in Iran and potentially elsewhere? Where are the priority targets?
Well, I think the first thing you would see is a complete wipeout of their air defense systems. As we saw in Venezuela, the United States is fantastic at taking out their ability to defend themselves. I mean, the Venezuelans are probably really regretting having bought all their Chinese air defenses on Temu because we took them. We showed that Chinese air defense is junk, and we can do the same to Iran. So that would probably be the first thing to happen. And the question here is what the president will do. There's going to be a lot of internal debate here in this country. We are not good at regime change. The United States and the CIA has messed that up for generations. We've intervened in areas, over 50 different interventions since the invention of the CIA in 1949. And a lot of them have been failures. And it's a fair question for Americans to ask. But I also ask, when Tiananmen Square happened and we did nothing, I think this president is making that tough decision. His national security team is looking at the human rights abuses going on in Iran. So they're looking at it strategically from the oil standpoint and from countering Chinese monopoly on Iranian oil. But they're also looking at what can be done to. I mean, Trump said it in a tweet. He can't stand seeing this killing, and it's mass killings and hangings and sexual abuse and slaughter of innocent Iranians who have lived under this corrupt regime for 50 years.
Yeah. I actually think, and my 2 cents, this is one of those things where you go big or you go home. Now, I don't want to inherit the nation of Iran because it's a fractious place and it's a fractured place. It's nowhere near as Unitarian as people believe. But in terms of what comes next, feels to me like a really loaded question. I get that. But that said, any strike that leaves the mullahs still in charge, take out their air defenses, cripple their navy, destroy their planes on the ground. Okay, let's say we achieve all of that. And that's, I would argue, achievable in light of the firepower that we can bring to bear. It's going to be so asymmetric. And maybe, clean up some of what's left of their nuclear program if we can, in fact, identify that. And we're going to have good intel from the Israelis, obviously, and the Saudis. But I would argue that if you leave that regime intact, very much like, we saw with the beginnings of the Green Revolution when Obama was called upon to support the people in the streets and didn't do it. Now we're revisiting it. Feels to me, as somebody who is old enough to remember the '79 revolution, there's no nation on earth that has more American blood on its hands than this regime, the Iranian Islamist regime. I feel like if we do it, they gotta go. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Is that part of the target picture here? Is the Trump administration thinking the Ayatollah's got to go?
I don't know. To be completely blunt with you, I don't know that that's what they're thinking, and that's up to the president's top advisors. And I'm sure they're going to give him. He's got an incredible team there. Marco Rubio is certainly dual-hatted as both the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor to the president. Is going to give him really solid advice, and I think the president's gotten very solid advice until now. And we've been at war. As a proxy war with Iran and its proxies for 50 years.
Yeah.
They have been attacking American interests. They've been attacking Western interests. They've been directly hitting American businesses and American civilians and American territory for my entire life. And it is, this is a president who's going to do something about that. And I think he may, as you've hinted, he may behead the beast.
Yeah, I feel so. I'm sure he's getting the intel that we all, have read and have had briefed to us, things like IEDs in Afghanistan and Iraq that were Iranian made. The Iranians have just been the source of so much mischief. They've been the source of so much mischief in the Middle East that they've managed to push the Sunni world and the Israelis together. Thanks to Iran's malfeasance, you have all of a sudden the Saudis and the Israelis looking at each other and saying, boy, do we have a common enemy. And it's pushed them. I talk about, a shotgun marriage, something that is quite unlikely. But there it is. And if you bring in the Saudis, of course, you're getting a lot of the rest of the Sunni world. Now, let me ask you this. I know we're running out of time. The Qataris are going to play a role in this. They tend to be the interlocutor in the Middle East, and that's where CENTCOM, which is going to be very involved in this whole operation, they are going to be thick as thieves here. Our biggest Middle East base is in Qatar. I got to ask you, in light of the fact that the Israelis hit Hamas in Qatar, the Qataris, you could call them an interlocutor. You could also say that they're playing both sides of the fence. How is this going to go relative to Qatar? Can we trust them here? Is our base safe? Because from where I sit, a lot of this stuff is going to be run out of Qatar. And boy, those are a slippery bunch. That regime, the Thani regime, their version of the mullahs, their sheikhs that run the place. I don't know where they stand in this whole thing. What's your assessment?
Well, I think running the world is a complicated business. And that's really what America's tried to do for so long. We gussy up the language. We want a new international order and blah, blah, blah. But the United States has 700 military bases around the world. And in many cases, those bases are very vulnerable. They're tripwires. And we behind me, it says America first. I'm an America first person. And it doesn't mean isolationist, but it does mean what we need to do is in any conflict, ask the question, what is in it for the American citizen? What is in it for the American taxpayer? I know that sounds cold, but it has to be, because
Yeah.
we don't have the funds. We don't want to spend the treasure. I've laid to rest 266 Americans, great sailors, officers, enlisted both. Um, and it's a huge responsibility to pass that flag across a tombstone and thank a mother, a brother, a father, a son for their
Yeah.
loved one's honorable and faithful service. And it's why I'm running for Senate, because our leaders have to think about those flags and those families first before they ever commit American troops and American treasure
Yeah.
to, a war, any war.
Did I tell you about Captain Morgan? I mean, the guy should be elected on his voice alone. God help us. I mean, you got to check out the full podcast. His insights are tremendous. There's nothing like career military for me, man. These guys, these people assaulted the earth, male, female, whatever. All right. Outro real quick. I want to talk about Signal Gate, as I said at the top. How far is this going to go? You've seen the reports online that in the Signal app, there are Ice Watch type and Ice Watch itself, I assume, forums constituted for the people who want to get in front of, to interfere with, and maybe worse, relative to ICE in Minnesota, for them to share information, share license plates, deploy all the stuff that they frankly accuse ICE of doing. They want to dox these guys and they want to interfere. Now, I don't know if Preddy was on any of those. I don't know if he's in there or not, but the allegations are that there are members of the Minnesota government and Minneapolis government in there cooperating with these activists, which is no good and which is, I think, chargeable. How far up is this going to go? There's reporting that it goes all the way to Waltz's office. I want to be clear. I haven't corroborated that. What I want to focus on is, how do you corroborate that? Here's the problem I think a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people on the web are saying, get in there, dump the phone, dump the server, get all of these people, identify them. Okay, that sounds great. 15 years ago, Signal is an encrypted app. It's end-to-end encrypted. It can't be intercepted. You can't wiretap it. Furthermore, you can't even dump the server. If you got to Signal itself, which I believe the server is probably someplace either offshore or in California, even if you got there, the whole thing's encrypted. You're not going to get anything. All right? It's very, very hard. How do you actually manage to penetrate it? Here's what you got to do. You got to get somebody who's under arrest or under heavy investigation who was involved, and you got to get the physical phone. Then you got to get into that phone. Now, we all know our phones are password protected these days. You got to defeat that, which is also not easy these days. You got to do it all with a warrant, by the way. This all has to be done legally. I'm not saying you grab somebody off the street and take their phone. I got to take a sip of wine. Stand by. You can't just dragoon somebody and say, give me your phone because I don't like your face. You got to have an investigation, or they're under arrest. And if they're under arrest, you have to have probable cause that the phone has evidence of the arrest or further crimes. A lot of people think it's easy for law enforcement to do this stuff. This is one of the reasons I went to law school, because you got to know these parameters. Then you got to go to a judge. The judge has to agree and has to sign off on the warrant. That's comparatively the easy part. These days, the hard part is to now get into that phone. Now, there's a couple of ways. I don't want to give up too much tradecraft. There's a few ways that you could potentially get into the phone or get into the communications. But at the end of the day, even with the phone, even if you jailbreak it, they call it, which is to say you defeat the password and the phone opens up, or you get a cooperator who says, okay, I don't want to do 15 years in jail. I'll give everything I got. You open the phone. Here it is. Now you have something, because you open the Signal app in there, and assuming that that's not password protected, you open it and you can see the communications. Now you have at least something of a window into it. So you can say, okay, this one is called XYZ in the forum. I don't know who that is, but I can tell from the way they're talking that they seem to be somebody who's doing ABC. And now you got to start cross-referencing. You got to figure out who it is. You got to develop sources who will tell you, oh, XYZ, yeah, that's Joe Schmo. He lives up the block. And you have to start to map the networks. My point is the following. You're going to start to get, if it hasn't started already, people online saying, Where's DOJ? Why isn't Bondi doing this? Why don't we have a big dump of Signalgate and everybody identified and arrested? Because of end-to-end encryption, excuse me, you could have a warrant from the most powerful, friendly judge in the world. It doesn't matter. You got to beat the encryption in order to figure out what's going on there, and then you got to trace it back to a human being. And it's very, very difficult in the age of encryption, which is why they use Signal. I'm not telling you anything that the people that are in that app who are running this Ice Watch thing, I'm not saying anything that they don't know, because as I said, that's why they're doing it. That said, it's doable with enough resources and enough work, and I know that they're plugging very hard at this. So don't be surprised if at some point you get some big revelations. The key is you got to flip somebody and you got to get into that network and figure out who they are. That's going to do it for tonight's Night Watch. We'll be back later in the week. I want to do Venezuela and a couple of other things. Keep your eyes on Cuba, folks. All of these things are relative to your security, my security, and the security of the world. I'm Paul Morrow. We are opsdesk.org. And in the meantime, all of you, please stay safe.